Nah, just kidding. It's me, Bradley Ellis, and I'm here to talk about Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight Trilogy. So, what we're going to be talking about is the creative processes behind Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Rises. We're going to get interviews from the audiences to tell you how they feel about that universe. And then I'm going to give you some insight into the creative processes with Christopher Nolan, giving you insight into what he did and what inspiration he took to create this masterpiece of a universe.
The Dark Knight Trilogy, for me, a lot of things stand out about it, really. I mean, the cinematography is excellent, of course. Being a big fan of Christopher Nolan, you see, his textbook, the way he makes films, it all shines through, really. And the way he revolutionises it and the realism of the films, the way these characters, it could be believable. You could believe that Batman is actually a real person in that scenario. You could see that a billionaire with that much money that was that clever could make that sort of stuff. And the fight scenes all seem very real. It's all gritty is the word I'd use for it.
And it showcases all the best aspects and all the worst aspects of the characters, and never does any of the over-the-top, ridiculous, cartoonish stuff that was shown in Batman Forever and Batman and Robin.
In 2003, the first film in the trilogy was in production. That film was called Batman Begins. This is when Christopher Nolan was attached to direct the project. Christopher Nolan stated that he wanted the origin story of the character, and he said that this story has never been told before. Christopher Nolan's approach to this film was to take a well-established character and put him in a realistic world, taking on realistic problems. Nolan wanted to move past the campiness of what Warner Brothers did in Batman and Robin. He wanted to lean into the dark and grittiness of the character, which revolutionised the character moving forward.
I think it's very appropriate because the last movies were very goofy and it kind of affected them, but these movies kind of bring it back down to what Batman for me is really about. And it also makes characters like Scarecrow, Two-Face and the Joker more threatening, I'd say. Like, compared to the other movies, it makes them like actually scary and like stand out, I'd say.
The realism it's very accurate, it's sort of, it takes Batman into a place where it's no longer this outside realm of, it used to be a comic book thing, it was all very silly, there's all these adaptations. I mean, there was George Clooney's Batman, and then you had Michael Keaton, when he played Batman, they sort of took a more serious take on it, and people weren't really a fan of it. And then coming into the 21st century, I think Christopher Nolan really revolutionised that realism and then turned it into something that is basically a staple of the times. I mean, this was alongside with James Bond had a reboot as well. Casino Royale came out, and both of those films went back to gritty, realer roots, and I think sort of changed the film industry going forward. And everyone just tried to replicate that afterwards because they clearly nailed the formula somehow. And Christopher Nolan, especially in his Dark Knight trilogy, really nailed that realism.
Audiences loved how, as an audience, we got to follow Bruce Wayne's journey from the moment he lost his parents to seeing him train to be Batman and then to actually see him be Batman.
I'm Batman.
This element to a Batman story was never shown in live-action film before, and this gave us something unique and fresh. Christian Bale's Batman is highly respected within the comic book community. His portrayal of the Dark Knight is something unique in the sense he is vastly different from other live-action films. The voice Bale uses when he played Batman was exciting yet menacing at the same time.
Where were the other drugs going?
I never knew. I don't know. I swear to God.
Swear to me!
Which helped solidify the theme of realism, because criminals wouldn't be much afraid of him if he didn't use that voice. The audiences are divided regarding his voice, but nonetheless it is unique and helped bring the terror to the heart of criminality. In 2008, the sequel to Batman Begins was released. That film was none other than The Dark Knight. Now, The Dark Knight, to most fans of Batman and critics themselves, called this film a masterpiece. This film explored more of organised crime that was set up in Batman Begins. Christopher Nolan managed to carry over the themes of realism, which is highly represented in this film. This film introduced us to Heath Ledger's Joker, which most of the fans think he is the best Joker that has ever been portrayed in live action. Christopher Nolan stated that for us, one of society's palpable fears is the collapse to anarchy, the idea of people in society who will not be in any way will be bound by any kind of convention, whether that of society or of a convention of criminal society. This is the approach he wanted to depict within The Dark Knight, and these subject matters are well represented in this film. Seeing Batman go up against the Joker within this realistic world is something that makes this film interesting. To see two beloved characters clashing with one another through the art of realism is unique and creates a narrative that you wouldn't see in a comic book film. This film focuses a lot on the psychological aspects of these characters, which helps represent the themes of realism within this world.
My overall thoughts is that it is such an icon of not only superhero cinema, but cinema in general, because of how it's raised the bar, the very subtle references to the comics without introducing all the campiness from the comics, the character development and the story, and especially how the symbolism works in each film and how it references to that, usually through the use of the Bat logo at the beginning of each film. And also how the movie doesn't start with 5 minutes of opening credits, it literally just shows the symbol and then gets in and starts off with the action. It doesn't even show the title until the very end of the film. And it's just become such a landmark for everything, not only just Batman, but how superhero films should be done, and how it's not just some silly kids' fantasy, it can be a very well-told story in a well-grounded universe, and it can really get you invested within the story and the characters.
I just think they're really amazing. I think they're very clear. They're very clear on what they're trying to say. They have very clear messages, like things like chaos, like pain, revenge, things like that. It's very clear what they're trying to do, and I think Nolan, he's doing something different, but he's still staying true to the character. And something else I also love, that they're very accessible to people who probably maybe don't know Batman very well, but if you watch these movies, you kind of understand what makes them so interesting compared to the other ones, the other superheroes. And also, the performances are so good, particularly, obviously Heath Ledger, he won an Oscar for it, and he is so menacing. He just takes over the film whenever he comes on screen. I also particularly love Alfred in it. His performance is really engaging, his very quotable lines.
Why do we force? So that we can learn to pick ourselves up.
And the action and the way it's done through the cinematography and editing is so mesmerizing, particularly in The Dark Knight. I don't think it's amazing in the first one. I think it's more about the character, but the second one and a little bit in the third one is it's so engaging to watch.
In 2012, a third and final film was released called The Dark Knight Rises. Christopher Nolan said that the themes for this film was a disaster movie and a historical epic. This means Christopher Nolan's approach to this film was to explore the downfall of Gotham and watch the citizens tear each other apart whilst witnessing the downfall of Gotham's well-known vigilante, the Batman. This film explored in more depth the chaos that Gotham faces in the face of terror. This film introduced us to Tom Hardy's Bane. Now, his version of Bane is vastly different from the Bane in the comics. Bane in the comics is represented as this big brute who uses venom to enhance his strength. But in Christopher Nolan's world, Bane was represented as this mercenary who may still have the physical advantage over Batman, but nowhere near to what he was like in the comics, and he doesn't have the use of venom to enhance his strength. The reason why is because this aspect of Bane wouldn't have worked through the art of realism that Christopher Nolan has created in this world. So he focused around the strategic attributes of the character from the comics and used that as a focal point of his character. Now, this had mixed reviews with the fan base, with some people criticising Tom Hardy's Bane voice as not liking that they strayed too far from the comics.
Oh, you think darkness is your ally? You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it, molded by it.
Others loved how they approached Bane in this film, the way he brought realism to the character and maintaining the psychological attributes from his comic book counterpart. This film gave an epic conclusion to Batman's journey.
A hero can be anyone, even a man doing something as simple and reassuring as putting a coat around a young boy's shoulders to let him know the world hadn't ended.
The fact is, we did get the experience of Bruce's journey throughout all 3 films, and this film gave a satisfying conclusion to his journey. So I have taken you on a journey. I have taken you a journey on through the creative processes behind what Christopher Nolan did to make this masterpiece of a universe. We had audiences tell their perspective, how these films have influenced them and how they think these films have influenced the film industry and the comic book genre. I can categorically say that this film franchise is what shaped superhero films moving forward. Take Man of Steel, BVS, Zack Snyder's Justice League. We're looking at this film franchise brought something that nothing could ever seem possible. Realism to comic book characters. I myself have a quote. Why do we fall? So we can learn to pick ourselves up. This film franchise is the best. No, the absolute best that comic book films could ever be. I am Bradley Ellis, and this was my documentary.